Hey, welcome to Roll for Effort.
Welcome to Roll for Effort and Happy New Year.
Yep.
Happy New Year.
I am Jason, and we're here tonight with Joe and Chuck, two awesome DMs and players. And tonight we are on leadership again. We are talking about leadership, and
Indeed. The deeper the dive. Or
yeah, the
deeper
deep dive.
We'll edit my extra word out in post.
Right? So last time when we were talking about leadership, we just was sort of glossing over why we think it's important. And one of our commenters on YouTube actually said, Daniel Luco, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, hopefully, said,
Right? How do you push players to their limits without just pissing them off royally?
yes.
Sorry, I had it right in front of me. My bad.
Yeah. So that is at the heart of the matter, right? Like that's a really good meaty question. How do you push players to the limits without pissing them off?
Yeah, first thing you got to find out is what those limits are.
Yes.
Right?
Because I've had lots of players that have very different limits.
Yeah.
Right? You know, and there's actually a benefit there for the whole session zero aspect. That's one of those things that can help you learn what those limits are, and you know, that's a discussion for another time. But that communication with players to find out those limits, so you know what points to push and what points not to push.
Yeah.
Which just in turn help make an exciting game for everybody as a GM.
Yeah. In any time that I start a new game with a new group of players, I try to bring up with them what my limits are.
Right.
And a lot of times that helps give them an opportunity to express what theirs are.
Exactly.
Even with our game that we ran recently, I say recently, but like within the last year, we were running Warp Shell Dragon, and I knew there was going to be a scene where like a whole village was going to get murdered, and I went out and I asked everybody straight up, what are your limits? Because I didn't want to, do something that was going to throw somebody off, or, if they were the bad guy in the situation, would that be a problem?
Right. That totally made sense. I mean, I definitely remember getting those like, hey, what's too far? And I was like, as long as there's no rape, let's do it.
Yeah,
I'm good with anything.
Yeah, and that's a standard limit that I recommend. Like, never ever go there. Any kind of sexual violence, because the problem is you don't actually know what people have encountered in their lives, and they won't want to talk about it if they have.
Yep.
So that is a hard, don't go there.
Yeah. So like, I mean, that aside, once you know those limits, once you've had that conversation about, where those limits are, pushing to those limits but staying within them, how do we push these players to those, defined limit, to those safe limits, you could say, without just pissing them off royally, without making them feel like they're being, railroaded or led or out of options? How do you push those limits?
Well, to me, it's all around challenge. I mean, the groups I work with or play with, you challenge them to the point where they almost like they fail their personal morale check. Because I've been there many times myself, where you're playing the game and you go, yep, there's no way we're going to make it through this one. It's an impossible situation. And that is usually where somebody around the table figures it out. Maybe there's some other option they can go down, or another avenue that they can take that will help them overcome whatever they're facing. But that makes it super challenging. So, and I'm not saying every encounter should be super challenging, because if you do that, you will probably just piss your players off, which is what he doesn't want. He wants to avoid. But have an encounter that's looks like an impossible situation. Keep throwing, as our picture shows here, keep throwing goblins up that hill until he's got one hit point left and no spell slots anymore, and he has to figure out how to take out those last 2 or 3 goblins.
Right. And that orc or hobgoblin or whoever this is coming up down here on the bottom, like, that's obviously more of the big bad style, but that's definitely a good representation. This image here of pushing the players, but that seems more being pushed just on the combat front. I mean, obviously there are hordes of goblins. This is where the timer die would come in great. Every D4 rounds, or even every turn, pick a die size. This many more goblins are coming. That would actually probably be a good spot for just going on this image. Every round, D6 goblins are showing up. This instance, I would give the goblins just a single hit. Like, let them drop like flies because you are going to be swarming this guy with them. So that's already a combat push there. But then every D4 rounds, one of these big dogs down here at the bottom, Big Red, is coming in. And he's maybe got 10 hit points, and he's doing 2d6 damage, so he's going to be the knuckle dragger. He's going to, stomp it. But again, that's just combat challenge.
Right.
In this same situation, if we made that red guy 5 hit points, so he's still going to drop pretty easy. That's like single hit die. Add in the extra challenge of, he's up on what looks like the top of a ruined tower. There's wind blowing. Every couple rounds, that wind is going to come through hard. Give me that dex check or that strength check to hang on so you don't get blown off this tower. So it's just like a little extra push, or maybe the ground is rumbling and you could just one way or another tumble off. Just these extra kind of environmental pushes are good ways to just up that threat level or that pressure.
And with every single one of those, Joe, you actually did something almost subconsciously because of your excellent DMingness. Strong telegraphing of the upcoming pressure, I think, is really helpful. There's a lesson that you get in drama, which is that if you're going to create a tragedy, a tragic story, you always telegraph really early that, hey, this is going to be a sad story. So that players, it can still they'll sort of be able to see it coming in a way, right? So you telegraph the ground is running, or when you roll that timer, you let them know that okay, something as bad is going to happen in D4 turns. You get a sense that something bad is going to happen in D4 turns. And that kind of, foreshadowing, right? So telegraph very strongly that more things are going to happen, and that actually kind of makes it a little bit more fair for the players too, because now they have an opportunity to start thinking of, well, how do we get out of this? Is there a way to get through this that isn't just sword and board and trying to beat down whatever you got planned?
Another fun thing that totally ramps on that pressure is just totally throw them a little mind bleep. I self-edited, yay! But throw them a little mind whammy. Hit them with those timers or those events coming in every round, every turn, whichever. Bad. Here's a treat. So by the time they're like, oh crap, that timer die is running out, it's going to be something horrible. No, here comes some reinforcements or some benefit that's going to help them, and then all of a sudden it'll flip them. It'll it's like the kettle is at that boiling point, and they're like, oh my god, there's so many here already. There's so much crap happening, and there's another timer die that's about to expire. Oh my god, what's happening? Boom! Now here's something helpful, and they're just gonna oh man, the explosion of good vibes of, oh my god, we have a chance. But then follow right up with another bad whammy.
Right.
It'll keep that pressure on, but it'll alleviate it just enough that you don't burn out the threat of that timer die. So they start to not be able to expect what's coming on of instead of, oh boy, another D4 timer, we've got another one of these orcs or ogres coming up at us. Instead it's oh no, some guy came out of the woods and started launching arrows. Oh my god, that's amazing. And then the next timer is unexpected. They won't exactly know which way it's going to go, and that will kind of add more pressure to that whole situation, that push. And that's just, again, these are mostly just combat pushes.
Yeah, I was going to say, so we have a lot of combat things, and that's really easy to put pressure on a combat scenario in games. Mm-hmm. But how do you pressure your players during an exploration or during role playing? And here's a good example that comes from my games a lot. My players want to go to town and they want to buy magic items. They could spend all night arguing about with various vendors. Oh, do you have a sword, a magic sword, or a magic dagger? Do you have anything? And you spend all your game time not doing what I consider productive work towards building story, but just figuring out how to do stuff in, buy stuff. So like one of the things I put on pressure is like we don't, at least in my game, we don't role play town, or we give them what are the 2 or 3 things you're going to do in town, and then we move on. And it's so so I push that pressure on. Well, let's get on to the story. Now I don't want to push off role playing because my players are often interested in what I call role playing for story advancement, not necessarily for building tension or combat. They just want to sit around a campfire and shoot the breeze about what they did today. And occasionally that's really good, and my players liked it. I don't, so that's one of the things where it's a real pressure on me to keep them from doing that all night. But I think that's one thing you need. It's harder to do. Combat pushing is easy. Pushing them into how can you keep your story pressure on without making them mad. So like instead of for instance, take their NPC, and one of the things I've done in many games is take the NPC that they've really built a relationship with and kidnap or kill them.
Yep, that puts pressure.
You know what? I'm going to throw a sideways spin on this, though. I think, because I learned a really important lesson kind of this last year in a lot of the games that we ran, I actually think it's super important. If you want to be able to lead them to that extremely high tension pressure point without them snapping and quitting your game and throwing their dice at you, you've got to plan and have the low spots too, where there is no pressure or there's light pressure for a short period of time, right? You have to have that down flow in order to enjoy the up, up, up. Because if you do nothing but up, 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 and up, and up, and up, and up for game after game after game, unless they're the kind of players who just really like that kind of experience of having their blood boil over and having their blood pressure skyrocket, you've got to have the flow where you go down every now and then and just have the nice little relaxed. And I say relaxed, it's not really necessarily relaxed, but just like the dungeon crawl moment where the players can have some time to breathe and banter a little bit, before the action kicks in.
If you're putting in a pressure cooker every Monday night when you're gaming, and you're keeping that pressure cooker for 3 hours every week, for week after week after week, ultimately it doesn't matter what you're going to do. Ultimately, someone's going to snap, and that's going to be the end time. That's going to be a different issue in your game, and you're going to have to deal with that phase as well. And I definitely recommend you not keep that pressure cooker on 100% of the time every week.
Right, because that pressure will blow. But still, in that instance of like putting pressure, if I could touch back to where you were going, Chuck, like in town, like pummel those NPCs, kill one, kidnap one. Those are fantastic things. But you could also have it in that sense of they get their little downtime. Tell them, hey, while you guys are in town, everybody's got 3 rolls or 3 dice rolls. Whether you're buying something, you're haggling, whatever you are doing in town, you could take 3 dice rolls to kind of move along. But then you could also, to kind of keep some pressure, if you want a pressure moment here, going by whatever story you are following, you can have those elements either follow them into town or start threatening the town. Whatever pressure moment that is. So then it kind of makes these... It puts a element of pressure on those dice rolls, especially if it's something you really need. Say you need item A, B, and C, right? And your players, or each player tries, like, how many of those 3 dice rolls they have do they want to use on that? And now the pressure comes in on that point of I want to heal with one of my dice rolls. I want to buy this magic weapon that we need with one of my dice rolls. We're out of supplies, so we need to try and get these supplies. And if each player has different things, like say each player wants to heal, well, there's 1 dice roll there, but then if a dice roll fails, do you waste another dice roll trying to get healed back up? If you want to use one of those dice rolls to get this spell researched as quickly as possible, well, you failed that, but you still kind of need that spell. You've only got 2 dice rolls left. So, I mean, if you put like this limit on the amount of time that you spend in town, it can make that town dynamic, no matter where the players are. If they split up and go around, that's fine. But that time dynamic, again, kind of comes back to keeping that pressure down. It could be, if it was a kidnap situation, you've only got those 3 dice rolls. And then if you're not out, said person is done. They're going to be cooked up in that Indiana Jones people cooking pot.
Right.
It's done.
Yeah.
So, you use those 3 rolls. Do you want a chance to use a 4th? It's going to cost you. It's kind of a, Faustian bargain at that point.
Yeah.
But those are elements like limiting the amount of time or dice situation, whichever you have in town, that you can kind of keep that pressure bubbling and pushing back into the story. And if it's tied into the story element, it's going to be even better for
I agree with all
the
that.
folks at the table.
Yeah, I agree.
Just some thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. And I had another stray thought here, but I just lost it. Well,
and pressure in non-combat situations. Moments where cities are important, where playing in a city is important. If you're doing like a political or an intrigue style campaign, where you're in town and faction A and faction B are doing their whole bits, for them, that non-combat style, like laying that pressure down in the social situation, as it were, because political and intrigue all really falls into that social bit. Fighter, put your sword away. We've got to use our brains and pretty faces now, which could turn into combat. Everybody knows that barbarian that just runs in and, I rage. It happens.
Yeah.
But
that's brilliant, though, what you talked about, though, that faction. So one of the things that's, you want to put pressure on players, give them a choice between one iffy faction and one maybe not so iffy faction, but maybe they're both iffy factions. Think of, okay, I'm going to choose between the mafia and the drug cartel. Okay, which one am I going to support? And I know that's pretty, you're helping 2 quote evil organizations, but make it so that when they have those decision points that they have to make, there's some question about whether or not, it's not always have to be evil versus or good versus evil, because most players, good versus evil, they're going to choose the good no matter what.
Right, heroes will be heroes.
Yeah, choose neutral and maybe slightly neutral, or slightly evil, or maybe slightly good even. But they're close. But one's going to have consequences. So I think that's another way to put pressure on in those social situations, to give them choices that actually mean something.
Right. The options, right? Or even letting them pick their own poison. Like I was doing with you guys in one of the games, where I would have you roll a d6 when you entered a room, and I'd ask, all right, what's the worst and the best thing that could happen? And if they failed the d6 roll, then the worst thing would happen. It would be the thing the player had chosen. So
right, and those were great moments. Like, because I remember, quite often it came up, pick the worst case scenario and the best case scenario for this action. Now roll a d6.
Right.
The closer you got to one way or the other, that was the outcome. And those were great moments.
Yeah, and that's hard to get to a place where you can do that. But, if we're getting back to the heart of the question, which is not just how do you put the pressure on them, but how do you push them to the limits without them snapping? And I think giving them a measure of control in the matter is really important.
Yeah.
They need to feel like they have an out in some way, or that they are somewhat responsible for the bad things that are going on. And then then they're less likely to just sort of blow up on you, because they know why it's there. It's because they came up with it, Well, or they caused the problem that led to the situation they're in.
Right. That's like that option C. Like, always leave that one open. Like, as a game master, you pick, like going between the 2 factions, faction A, faction B, siding with either one of them, you can put a little moral imperative in that. Faction A will give you something, they're not so great, but here's a little good thing out of it. Faction B, they might not be so great, but here's a little good thing. But always leave that option C, because no plan ever written or conceived survives contact with players. So if they come up with just some off the wall, like, hey, what if we did this instead? run with that, because that's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And always pay attention to your players and take notes, because sometimes what they come up with is better than what you had originally.
Yeah.
And think of the elation when like they turn out to be right all of a sudden.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have to go even deeper on some of this in a future conversation here, because there are a lot of really great points about how to read people, you know, and to get a better barometer for the people that you're working with. So with that, I mean, we're out of time tonight on this particular subject, but if any of you out there have any other questions for us, as you've seen tonight, we're glad to talk about them and dig a little deeper in. And, you know, we look forward to seeing you guys all next week.
Yep. Hey, Daniel Lugo, I hope we at least start to scratch the surface on how to pressure your folks at your table without pissing them off.
Yep, absolutely.
So
let us know
how that works for you.
Timers.
Yep. Timers.
So smart to use timers.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.
Bye.